My boyfriend said he wanted an open relationship, so I opened it up to his family tree. I was sitting across from Lorcan on our 5-year anniversary when he took out a velvet box and tossed it across the table. Look, I'm down to get married, but I need freedom to explore. There's so many beautiful women out there, he continued, and I need to experience them before I die. I stared at the Rolex on his wrist, his Gucci belt, all paid for by me while he got his shit together. Here's what Lorcan didn't know. I'd spent our entire relationship lying to him. See, Lorcan was like medium ugly at best, and he has a micro PP. Yes, you heard me right. 0. 5 inches. But my love language is words of affirmation, so I spent 5 years telling him size doesn't matter. I made him feel like he was incredible when he really, really wasn't. And now he actually believed it. You know what? You're absolutely right, I said. His head snapped up. See? This is why I love you. You get it. He reached across and squeezed my hand, already looking at a woman walking past our table. This is going to be amazing for us. I smiled back. He had no idea what was coming. Within a week, Lorcan was a different person. New cologne that he bought in 5 installments with Klarna. He'd sit on the couch next to me swiping through dating apps, showing me photos of women. This one wants to meet up Thursday, he'd say. You should try too. Oh wait, you're probably too shy for this lifestyle. I just nodded, because I had my eyes on a prize too. And after 2 weeks of Lorcan posting other girls on his Instagram story, his mom finally texted me about the family barbecue. You'll still come, won't you? His brother Jack and I both want you there. I wouldn't miss it, I said, and I meant it. At the barbecue, Jack was at the grill in a shirt that he probably paid for by himself. He smiled when he saw me. That genuine smile that made you feel like you mattered. Hey, he said. I heard about the open relationship thing. You doing okay? I stepped closer. Actually, I'm doing great. Lorcan wanted freedom. I'm just taking the same deal. His expression shifted. Oh yeah? We talked for an hour. Laughed. His hand brushed mine. Across the yard, Lorcan was watching us, his conversation dying mid-sentence. His mom came over and hugged me. I always thought you were too good for Lorcan anyway, she whispered. But here's the thing. While Lorcan was posting all these club photos and collecting phone numbers, his actual dates weren't going well. He'd come home early every time. Thursday night, home by 9. Friday night, same thing. He was getting quieter. The confidence was cracking. 2 weeks later, I was getting ready to go out when Lorcan walked into our bedroom. Where are you going? His voice was different, uncertain. I have a date. Oh. He sat on the bed. Anyone I know? I looked at him in the mirror. Yeah, Jack. His face went white. Jack? My brother Jack? Yep, that's not funny. I'm not joking. I grabbed my purse. You said anyone. No restrictions, remember? I didn't mean my brother. You said whoever I want. I want Jack. I headed for the door. You're being really insecure right now. I thought we were exploring. This is different. You can't what? I turned around. He opened his mouth. Closed it. He was trapped. That's what I thought, I said. Jack and I went to a nice restaurant where he asked about my life and actually listened. I've wanted to ask you out for 5 years, he admitted. But you were with my brother. I posted a photo of us that night. Lorcan viewed it on all 3 of his accounts. The text started at midnight. We need to talk. You're doing this to hurt me. After that, I started spending the nights at my best friend's house and didn't see him again until the next family dinner 3 weeks later. When Jack and I walked in holding hands, his mom practically ran over. Oh, I'm so glad you two finally got together. She hugged us. Jack has been talking about her for years. Years. But she was with Lorcan and he'd never do that to his brother. Lorcan sat through dinner silent while everyone gushed about Jack and me. His aunt kept saying things like, finally someone with a real career, and Jack always treated his girlfriends well, not like, before trailing off and glancing at Lorcan. After dinner, Lorcan followed me to the kitchen. Can we talk? His voice was small. Please. I'm kind of busy. Please. His eyes were red. I made a mistake. The open relationship isn't working. That's rough, I said. But my brother? Really? You said whoever I want. I'll close the relationship, he said coldly. We'll go back to normal. Just us. Like it was. That's not an ask. That's a warning. I stared, not knowing what he meant. The way he looked at me made my skin crawl. My phone buzzed in my pocket and Chelsea's name lit up the screen asking if I was okay since I'd been in the kitchen so long. I typed back that I needed to come over right now and grabbed my jacket from the coat rack. Lorcan blocked the doorway, but I pushed past him and told Jack I had to go handle something urgent. His mom hugged me goodbye while Lorcan stood there watching with his arms crossed. The drive to Chelsea's apartment took 20 minutes, and she was already waiting at the door with wine and her laptop open. I told her everything about the kitchen and his weird threat about closing the relationship. She started typing notes immediately and said we needed to document everything because that sounded like coercion. She pulled up a new document and had me repeat his exact words while she typed them with timestamps. We saved screenshots of all our text conversations from the past 3 weeks, including his messages about wanting an open relationship. Chelsea said this was important evidence if things got worse and I should keep records of everything from now on. The next morning, I woke up early and drove back to our apartment while Lorcan was at the gym. I went through every drawer and folder collecting receipts for things I'd bought him over the years. The Rolex receipt was in my jewelry box where I'd kept it after surprising him for his birthday. His Gucci belt receipt was in my email along with dozens of clothing orders from Nordstrom and Saks. I found rent payments going back 3 years, showing I'd paid 70% every single month. Grocery receipts filled an entire shoebox because I'd been buying all our food since he was between jobs for 2 years. My credit card statements showed restaurant bills, vacation expenses, and even his car insurance payments. I spread everything out on Chelsea's dining table and used her calculator to add it all up. The total came to $32,400, and seeing that number made me feel sick. I took photos of every single receipt and uploaded them to a cloud folder Chelsea helped me create. Then I texted Jack saying we needed to talk about boundaries with his family situation. He replied immediately and suggested meeting for coffee that afternoon at a place near his office. When I got there, he was already waiting with my usual order ready. He listened while I explained about Lorcan's behavior and said he understood if I needed space from his family drama. Jack promised to support whatever I needed and wouldn't pressure me about family events. He also mentioned that Lorcan had been calling him non-stop complaining about me, but he wasn't engaging with it. We agreed to keep our relationship separate from whatever was happening with his brother. Later that day, Lorcan posted a black and white photo of himself looking sad with text about fake people showing their true colors. I took a screenshot immediately and added it to my evidence folder without responding or even liking it. Chelsea came home from work and said I should really see a lawyer about our shared lease and getting my money back. She had a friend at a legal aid clinic who helped people with domestic situations and could see me later this week. I called and made an appointment for Thursday morning. 2 days passed with my phone constantly buzzing from Lorcan's messages. First, he sent long paragraphs about how much he loved me and made mistakes. Then he switched to angry texts about Jack being a terrible brother who betrayed him. I only responded to practical things like the electric bill being due and needing him to transfer his half. Every message I sent was short, and I screenshotted everything, including his responses. On Wednesday morning, Dean from HR called me into his office. Someone had made an anonymous complaint about my workplace behavior, claiming I was creating a hostile environment. I explained that my ex was harassing me and trying to cause problems at my job. Dean took notes and said they take retaliation seriously and would investigate the complaint thoroughly. He asked if I felt safe, and I said yes, but wanted it documented that this started after I ended things with Lorcan. Thursday's appointment at the legal clinic went better than expected. The advisor looked through all my documentation and receipts and explained my options clearly. She said I could pursue getting the money back through small claims court for anything that was a loan, not a gift. She also explained how to get off the lease if Lorcan couldn't afford the apartment alone. We spent an hour drafting a formal separation agreement that said Lorcan could keep the actual gifts like the watch and clothes, but he needed to pay back money for rent, groceries, and bills that were clearly loans to help him out. The agreement gave him 6 months to pay back $20,000 in monthly installments. She said this was generous since I could prove more, but it showed I was being reasonable. That afternoon, I sent the separation agreement to Lorcan's email with a read receipt turned on. The email said he had 1 week to respond before I would file in small claims court for the full amount. The read receipt showed he opened it within 3 minutes, but he didn't reply for hours. Around 7 that night, I was watching TV with Chelsea when the buzzer for her apartment went off over and over. Someone was pressing every button in the building trying to get in. Chelsea looked at the security camera on her phone, and there was Lorcan standing outside pressing buttons like crazy. My stomach dropped. He must have gotten her address from my work directory or something. Chelsea told me to stay quiet while she went to the intercom. Someone from upstairs had already buzzed him in, though. We heard footsteps running up the stairs and then pounding on Chelsea's door. "I know you're in there!" Lorcan was yelling and hitting the door, so hard the frame was shaking. I pulled out my phone and started recording while Chelsea grabbed hers to call building security. He kept pounding and yelling about needing to talk to me and how I was ruining everything. The whole hallway could probably hear him screaming about his brother and his life, and how this wasn't fair. I kept recording everything while Chelsea talked to security on the phone. Within maybe 5 minutes, 2 security guards showed up and we could hear them in the hallway telling Lorcan he needed to leave. He started yelling at them too about how I stole his brother and ruined his life and turned everyone against him. The guards weren't having it and basically dragged him toward the elevator while he kept screaming. Chelsea opened the door once they got him in the elevator and we talked to the guards. They took our statements about what happened and said they were banning him from the property. One guard wrote up official documentation about the incident and gave us copies. They said if he came back, they'd call the police immediately. My phone was blowing up with texts from Jack asking if I was okay. Lorcan had called him right after getting kicked out and was screaming about betrayal and threatening to tell their parents the truth about me. I texted Jack back that I was fine and had nothing to hide, unlike his brother who'd been living off my money for years. Jack said Lorcan sounded completely unhinged on the phone, and he was worried about what he might do next. I told him about the security incident and sent him the video I took. The next morning, I woke up to an Instagram message from someone named Melanie Yates. She'd sent screenshots of her text conversation with Lorcan from when they went out. In the messages, he was telling her he was basically single and in a dead relationship. She said when they met up, he couldn't perform at all, and then spent 20 minutes blaming it on stress from his toxic relationship with me. I thanked her for reaching out and explained briefly that we'd been in an open relationship that he demanded. She was completely disgusted and said he'd lied to her from the start. She offered to give a statement if I needed it for any legal stuff. I saved all her screenshots to my evidence folder. That afternoon, Lorcan finally sent his response to the separation agreement. It was this long, crazy email about how I'd manipulated him for years and turned his whole family against him. He said I was emotionally abusive and controlling, and that I'd planned this whole thing to steal his brother. He refused to sign anything and demanded that I move out of the apartment immediately since he needed his space. I forwarded it straight to my lawyer friend from the clinic. She helped me write a response pointing out that I was the primary person on the lease and had been paying most of the rent for years. The records showed I paid 70% of rent every month plus all the utilities. We gave him 30 days to find somewhere else to live or agree to the payment plan. She said his email actually helped our case because it showed he was being unreasonable. That night, his mom called me crying. Lorcan had told her I'd been emotionally abusing him for years, and she didn't know what to believe. I stayed calm and told her I had documentation of our whole relationship, including all the bank statements showing how much money I'd spent supporting him. She went quiet for a long time, and then said she needed time to think about everything. I could tell she was starting to see through his lies, but didn't want to believe her son would make all this up. 2 days later, I had my counseling appointment that I'd scheduled weeks ago. The therapist asked why I'd stayed so long with someone who didn't appreciate me or contribute anything. We talked about my childhood and how my parents always made me feel like I had to earn love by taking care of people. She helped me see this pattern of needing to be needed, and how Lorcan had used that against me. It was hard to hear, but I knew she was right. The session helped me understand why I'd put up with so much for so long. Later that week, I started getting calls from Klarna because Lorcan's payments were bouncing. They had me listed as an emergency contact from when he'd signed up for all those payment plans. Every company he owed money to was calling me because his bank account was empty. I gave them his new phone number and went through the process of removing myself from all his accounts. It took hours to untangle myself from all his financial messes, but I needed to protect my credit. Each company confirmed they'd removed me and would only contact him going forward. That same night, Jack texted asking if I wanted to grab dinner at this small Italian place downtown. I met him there after work, and we sat in a corner booth away from the windows. He ordered us wine, and we talked about normal stuff at first, like his job and my promotion prospects. Then he got quiet and looked at me seriously. "We should probably talk about what this is," he said. I nodded and waited. He told me he'd watched Lorcan treat me badly for years, but never knew how to say anything without overstepping. He admitted seeing me pay for everything while Lorcan sat around made him angry, but it wasn't his place to interfere. We agreed to take things slow and not put labels on anything yet. The next morning, I woke up to 3 Instagram messages from women I didn't know. They'd all matched with Lorcan on dating apps and wanted to share their experiences. The first one said he showed up 40 minutes late to their coffee date and spent the whole time talking about his ex who was threatened by his success with women. The second one said he tried to get her to pay for dinner because his card got declined. The third one sent screenshots of him asking to borrow money after one date. All 3 said he wouldn't stop talking about how his ex was crazy and controlling. I thanked them for reaching out and saved all their messages. That weekend, I decided to start moving my valuable items out of the apartment while Lorcan was at his new weekend job his uncle got him. Chelsea came over with boxes and we started packing up everything I could prove I'd bought. My laptop, jewelry, the expensive coffee maker, all the kitchen stuff I'd purchased, even the good sheets and towels. Chelsea kept watch by the window in case Lorcan came home early. We loaded everything into her car and took it to a storage unit I'd rented. The whole process took 3 hours and we made 4 trips. Monday morning, I called Colin White, our landlord, to discuss the lease situation. He agreed to meet me at a coffee shop near his office. I brought copies of all the rent payments showing I'd been covering most of it for years. Colin looked through everything and shook his head. He told me Lorcan was already 2 months behind on his portion, which I'd been covering without realizing. Colin agreed to remove Lorcan's name at the lease renewal in 3 months if the missed payments continued. He also said he'd been getting complaints about loud music and parties from Lorcan's unit since I'd been staying elsewhere. I thanked him and got everything in writing. 2 days later, my bank app sent an alert that someone tried to access our joint savings account. I'd already moved my portion to a separate account the week before, leaving only Lorcan's contributions, which totaled about $200. My phone started buzzing with angry texts from him saying I stole his money. I reminded him the remaining balance was only what he'd put in over 5 years. He kept texting that I was a thief and he'd call the police. I screenshot everything and didn't respond after that. The next morning, I saw his aunt had posted on Facebook about women who gold dig and then play victim when the relationship ends. It was clearly about me, even though she didn't use names. Within an hour, Jack had commented defending me, saying some people work hard while others mooch off their partners. His mom jumped in supporting Jack. Soon half the family was arguing in the comments. I stayed completely out of it and just watched the drama unfold. My counseling appointment was that afternoon and we spent the whole session talking about honesty. The therapist pointed out I'd been lying to myself as much as I'd lied to Lorcan. She helped me see that I'd convinced myself his laziness was temporary, and his lack of contribution would change. We talked about how being honest with myself meant recognizing my own worth, and not settling for someone who didn't value me. It was hard to hear, but I knew she was right about everything. That night, I got a message from Alexa Figueroa with laughing emojis. She'd gone out with Lorcan the previous week, and it was a disaster. He showed up late without his wallet and asked her to cover drinks. Then he spent the entire date talking about his crazy ex who was jealous of his success. He tried to invite himself back to her place and got mad when she said no. She said he mentioned me at least 15 times and kept showing her old photos of us to prove how happy he used to be. I thanked her for the warning and added her messages to my growing collection of evidence. By Thursday, I was done playing nice. I sat down and drafted a final email to Lorcan with clear demands. Move out within 45 days. Pay back the $5,000 he owed in monthly installments. Stop contacting me directly or through other people. I CC'd Colin, the landlord, and my legal advisor from the clinic. I included consequences this time, like eviction proceedings if he didn't leave, and small claims court for the money. I sent it Friday morning and waited. His response came Monday, but not by email. I was at my desk when Dean from HR called saying someone was in the lobby demanding to see me. I knew immediately it was Lorcan. Dean went down to handle it while I stayed at my desk. 20 minutes later, Dean called to say security had removed Lorcan from the building after he started yelling. They filed a formal no-contact order and put his photo at all security desks. Dean said HR was treating this as a safety issue and asked if I needed any other support. I thanked him and went back to work knowing I had another layer of protection now. 2 days later, Jack's mom called me while I was making dinner, and her voice sounded different. Softer somehow. She told me she'd been talking to other family members about everything that happened, and they all confirmed what she'd started to suspect about Lorcan's pattern of blaming everyone else for his problems. She admitted she'd always known he was irresponsible, but kept hoping he'd grow up if she just gave him enough time and support. I stirred my pasta while she talked about how she'd watched him go through job after job, always with some story about a bad boss or unfair treatment. She said she should have seen the signs when he moved back home 3 times before meeting me, each time with a different excuse about roommates or landlords being unreasonable. The conversation lasted 20 minutes, and by the end she was crying, saying she felt guilty for not protecting me from him sooner. That same week, I started getting messages from mutual friends who'd heard Lorcan's version of events. 3 different people reached out saying he'd been telling everyone I'd been cheating with Jack for months before we opened the relationship. They all said the same thing, though, that his timeline didn't make sense because he'd been posting about our anniversary dinner just weeks before claiming I'd been cheating for months. One friend sent me screenshots of Lorcan's messages where he contradicted himself about dates and details. Another friend who worked with Jack confirmed that Jack had been out of town for work during the time Lorcan claimed we'd started our affair. I saved all the screenshots in a folder labeled Evidence and kept documenting everything. The mediator Jasper Conrad called me Thursday morning to schedule our meeting at a coffee shop downtown for the following Monday. He explained the process would be neutral and focused on reaching a fair agreement about the apartment and finances. I agreed to the time and marked it in my calendar. Monday came and I arrived 15 minutes early, ordering a coffee and reviewing my documentation one more time. Jasper showed up right on time wearing a simple button-down shirt and carrying a leather folder. We shook hands and he explained we'd wait 10 more minutes for Lorcan before starting. 20 minutes passed before Lorcan finally walked in, wearing the Gucci belt I'd bought him for his birthday, and a designer jacket I recognized from my credit card statement 2 months ago. He didn't apologize for being late, just sat down and immediately started complaining about having to meet at all. Jasper stayed calm and pulled out paperwork, explaining we needed to discuss the apartment lease and any shared financial obligations. Lorcan slumped in his chair and admitted he couldn't afford the apartment alone since the rent was $2,800 a month, and his new job only paid him enough to cover maybe half that. He said he'd been trying to find a roommate, but nobody wanted to move in with the lease already in my name. Jasper took notes and suggested we work out a payment plan where Lorcan would have 60 days to either find a way to take over the lease or vacate the apartment. Lorcan's face got red and he started arguing that 60 days wasn't enough time, but Jasper reminded him that was already generous considering he hadn't paid rent in 2 months. I pulled out my folder and showed Jasper the documentation of Lorcan showing up at my workplace and Chelsea's apartment building. I explained how security had to remove him from my office, and how Chelsea's building had banned him from the property. Jasper wrote everything down in his notes, making sure to get specific dates and times. Lorcan suddenly got quiet and stopped arguing, his eyes darting between me and Jasper like he was just realizing how much evidence I'd collected. Jasper suggested we add a no-contact provision to the agreement, and Lorcan didn't object this time. We spent another hour going through financial details, with me showing bank statements proving I'd paid for almost everything during our relationship. Jasper calculated that Lorcan owed me close to $12,000, but suggested we settle for $5,000 in monthly installments to make it more realistic. I agreed because honestly I just wanted this to be over, and to have my freedom back without dealing with court proceedings that could drag on for months. Lorcan signed the agreement with shaking hands, agreeing to move out within 45 days and pay me $500 a month for 10 months. Jasper made copies for everyone and explained the agreement was legally binding and could be enforced through small claims court if necessary. After the meeting, I called Jack to update him and we talked about our situation. We both agreed it would be better to wait until after Lorcan moved out before being public about dating since we wanted to minimize drama and let things settle down. Jack said he understood completely, and that he'd rather do things right than rush into anything that might cause more problems. He pointed out that we'd already waited 5 years, so a few more weeks wouldn't matter, showing way more maturity than his brother ever had. Within days of signing the agreement, Lorcan started posting his designer items for sale online with sob stories about starting over after betrayal and rebuilding from nothing. I saw the posts because mutual friends kept sending me screenshots, but I didn't engage or respond to any of it. He listed the Rolex for half what I'd paid for it, and the Gucci belt for a third of its value, clearly desperate for quick cash. I focused on my own life instead, going to work, spending time with Chelsea, and slowly rebuilding my sense of self without his dead weight dragging me down. Chelsea came over the next weekend with paint samples and furniture catalogs, determined to help me reclaim my space. We spent Saturday painting the bedroom walls a soft blue color that Lorcan had always said was too feminine. Sunday we moved all the furniture around, getting rid of the ugly gaming chair he'd insisted on keeping in the living room, and replacing it with a reading nook I'd always wanted. We threw out his old posters and the stupid neon sign he'd bought for the kitchen that said, "Live, laugh, love," but ironically. By Sunday night, the apartment looked completely different, like a real adult lived there instead of a perpetual teenager. Chelsea helped me hang new curtains and arrange my books on the shelves I'd bought but never had room for before. The whole place finally felt like mine alone, not some compromise between what I wanted and what he'd tolerate. 2 weeks into the payment plan, my phone buzzed with a notification from my banking app showing a $500 deposit. I checked the transaction details and saw it was from Lorcan, right on schedule for the first payment. I forwarded the confirmation to my legal advisor at the clinic with a brief note acknowledging receipt, keeping everything professional and documented. There was no personal contact between us, just business through official channels, exactly how it should have been from the beginning if I'd been smarter about protecting myself. 3 days later, I came home from work to find Lorcan's key on the kitchen counter next to a folded piece of paper. The apartment felt different, emptier, with gaps on the shelves where his stuff used to be. I picked up the note and started reading something about how I'd destroyed his life and ruined his family relationships. I crumpled it up and tossed it in the trash without finishing it. The locksmith arrived within an hour and changed all the locks while I packed up the few things he'd forgotten into a box. I texted him that his stuff would be on the curb tomorrow morning and blocked his number again. That weekend, his mom called asking if I'd come to Sunday dinner because she still considered me family. I thanked her but said I needed some time to myself first. She understood and said the invitation would always be open whenever I felt ready. 3 weeks passed and I heard through mutual friends that Lorcan had moved back in with his parents. Apparently he was working at his uncle's construction company now, and telling everyone he was taking time to find himself after our toxic relationship. People who knew the real story just rolled their eyes when they heard his version. Jack texted asking if I wanted to try that Italian place downtown we'd talked about. We got a table by the window, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't look over my shoulder. He made me laugh telling stories about his coworkers and actually asked about my promotion at work. When the check came, he paid without making it weird or expecting anything in return. Walking back to my car, I realized this was what normal felt like. My counseling appointment that week focused on unpacking why I'd stayed so long with someone who didn't value me. We worked through my patterns of needing to be needed, and how I'd confused being used with being loved. She helped me see that my worth wasn't tied to what I could provide for someone else. I left feeling lighter than I had in years. The next month, my banking app showed another $500 deposit from Lorcan. This time there was a note in the memo field saying he was sorry for letting his ego ruin something good. I screenshot it for my records but didn't respond. He didn't deserve my forgiveness or my acknowledgement. Chelsea surprised me the following weekend by inviting a bunch of our friends over for what she called my freedom party. Everyone brought wine and snacks, and we sat around my newly decorated living room sharing stories. Turns out most of them had noticed the problems, but didn't know how to bring it up without seeming like they were attacking my relationship. My friend from work admitted she'd wanted to shake me when I'd mentioned buying him another expensive gift last Christmas. We laughed and cried, and I realized I had an amazing support system. Jack and I had been seeing each other regularly for a month when we decided to make things official. We didn't announce it on social media or make some big declaration. We just quietly became a couple without any drama or family meetings. He brought me coffee at work sometimes, and I'd cook dinner at his place. It was easy and comfortable in a way things with Lorcan never were. We talked about real things, and he remembered details about my life. When I mentioned my dad's birthday was coming up, he suggested we visit together. The payments from Lorcan kept coming on schedule, and I kept documenting them through my legal advisor. When the final payment arrived, there was an email through my lawyer asking if we could meet for coffee to get closure. I had my advisor respond that I wasn't interested in meeting and considered the matter closed. My closure was my new life without him dragging me down. 6 months after he'd moved out, I was at the grocery store picking up ingredients for dinner with Jack. I turned into the cereal aisle and there was Lorcan comparing generic brand prices with store brand. His designer clothes were gone, replaced with old jeans and a faded t-shirt. He looked up and saw me, his face going red. He started to say something about how I looked good and asked how I'd been. I politely said I was fine and needed to finish shopping. He stood there holding his basket of cheap groceries while I walked away feeling nothing but relief. Jack was waiting in the next aisle looking at pasta sauce and smiled when he saw me. We finished shopping together, him making jokes about my weird obsession with specific olive oil brands. At checkout, he insisted on paying even though it was my turn, saying he wanted to treat me. Driving home, I thought about how different everything was from a year ago. Back then, I was buying groceries for two while Lorcan sat at home swiping through dating apps. Now I had someone who contributed equally and actually appreciated what we had together. The apartment felt like home now, with my pictures on the walls and my books on every shelf. Chelsea had helped me paint the kitchen a soft yellow that made the whole space feel warm. Even my plants were thriving now that I had energy to take care of them. Work was going better too, since I wasn't stressed about money or dealing with Lorcan's constant drama. Dean had mentioned another promotion might be coming up, and I actually felt ready for it this time. The weekend Jack suggested we drive up to the mountains came 3 weeks later, and I packed my bag while looking at my organized closet that finally had space for just my things. We took his car up the winding roads and stopped at this little roadside stand where he bought us fresh apple cider without checking his bank balance first. At the cabin he'd rented, he carried both our bags inside and started a fire while I unpacked the groceries we'd bought together, splitting the cost without any weird tension about money. That night, we sat on the deck looking at stars, and he told me he'd watched Lorcan treat me badly for years, but didn't know how to say anything without seeming like he was just trying to break us up. He said he'd almost spoken up at Christmas 2 years ago when Lorcan made me pay for his parents' gifts, and then took credit for them. The next morning, we hiked to this waterfall, and he held my hand to help me over the rocks, even though I didn't really need help. Monday morning, Dean called me into his office and said the promotion paperwork was ready if I still wanted it. My new salary was almost double what I'd been making before, and Dean said I should have gotten this years ago, but I'd seemed too stressed and distracted to handle the extra responsibility. The first thing I did was update my direct deposit information to my new savings account that didn't have anyone else's name on it. 3 weeks into my new position, my team threw me a little celebration lunch, and everyone kept saying how much calmer and more focused I seemed lately. My birthday came 2 months later, and Jack's mom sent me a card with pressed flowers inside, and a note about how she'd never seen Jack this happy in his whole life. She mentioned at the bottom that Lorcan had started therapy and was working on his issues, which made me feel weirdly satisfied knowing he was finally dealing with his problems instead of making them mine. The apartment hunting started in spring when my lease renewal came up, and I realized I could actually afford something nice in a better neighborhood closer to work. Jack came with me to look at places, and we found this amazing one-bedroom with huge windows and actual closet space on the third viewing. The landlord ran my credit and approved me immediately since my score had jumped up without Lorcan's missed payments dragging it down. Moving day came on a Saturday, and Jack showed up with boxes and packing tape at 7 in the morning ready to help. We loaded everything into the truck he'd rented, and by noon we were sitting on my new living room floor eating Chinese food straight from the containers. Chelsea came over that afternoon with a plant and a bottle of wine to celebrate my new place that was actually just mine. Setting up my home office in the spare corner felt amazing, knowing I could finally work from home sometimes without Lorcan interrupting to ask for money or attention. My bank app showed me something incredible 6 months after Lorcan moved out when I checked my balance and saw actual savings accumulating for the first time in years. I opened an investment account that week and put in my first deposit, feeling genuinely excited about planning for retirement and maybe buying my own place someday. The financial advisor at my bank said I was in great shape for someone my age once I explained I'd recently gotten out of a financially draining relationship. Planning my first dinner party in the new apartment felt like such an adult thing to do, and Chelsea helped me pick out serving dishes at the thrift store. Jack and I cooked together the day of the party, him handling the main course while I made sides and dessert from scratch. Our friends started arriving around 7, and everyone brought wine or flowers and kept commenting on how happy and relaxed I looked. Chelsea pulled me aside in the kitchen and said she'd never seen me this light and free, like I'd finally become the person I was supposed to be all along. Someone took a group photo that night, and when I looked at it later, I barely recognized myself, because I was actually genuinely smiling instead of forcing it. The 1-year mark from that anniversary dinner with Lorcan came faster than I expected, and Jack made reservations at this nice place downtown. He wore a suit he'd bought himself and picked me up with flowers he'd chosen because he knew I liked tulips better than roses. During dinner, he kept fidgeting with something in his pocket, and finally stood up right there in the restaurant and got down on one knee. The ring he pulled out wasn't huge or flashy, but it was exactly my style, and he'd saved for it himself without putting it on credit or asking anyone for help. He talked about building something real together based on respect and partnership, and actually being equals in everything. My hands shook as he slipped the ring on my finger, and everyone in the restaurant started clapping while I said yes over and over. We called his mom from the car, and she cried happy tears saying she'd been hoping for this since the day she met me. Looking at Jack driving us home, I realized this was what real love felt like when it wasn't built on lies or financial dependence, but on genuine respect and honesty. And that's today's breakdown. Hopefully it gave you something practical to think about, not just a story to pass the time. If even one part stuck with you, that's a win. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one.